The MOVE Index. So why is it important? Well, the MOVE Index is a representation of the volatility of the U.S. Treasury market, which is incredibly important in times like this. It's actually what had me make some pretty major moves in my portfolio on Friday when I saw this thing spike. But we'll go through it real quick and I'll give you an understanding why I think it's important for everybody to at least have some understanding of this if you're managing your own portfolio. So what is the MOVE Index? Well, again, it's an acronym for the Merrill Lynch Option Volatility Estimate. Again, it's basically a weighted average of the implied volatility of the 1-month options on U.S. Treasuries. And typically it is linked to the 1-year, the 2-year, the 5-year, the 10-year, and the 30-year Treasury bond. So that's what it's measuring. It's measuring the 1-month option volatility because bonds have options on them, just like stocks have options on them. And they're priced with the Black-Scholes model that factors into what this MOVE Index is showing you. This is equivalent to the VIX. The VIX is the stock index volatility coefficient. So we just have it for bonds. But in here, I posit that right now, the bond market is much more important to be following than the stock market. I'll talk about this in future videos, but just I wanted to get this out here so when I speak about the MOVE Index, you understand what I'm speaking about. So really what it is, it's here for you to be able to see what the market's expectations of future fluctuations in treasury yields. So that's what it's doing. It's basically forecasting out future movements in interest rates. And it typically, when it's elevated, it signals stress or uncertainty, which is not what you want in the bond market. The bond market's all about certainty, right? The bond market is used for people to match their liabilities with the cash that they have. And typically bonds are one of the go-to instruments to be able to liability match there. Again, more about that in another video down the road. And so what happens when you have an elevated MOVE Index, it signals that there's a lot of turbulence in here. And then what typically happens when you see this is conditions start to tighten, mortgage rates jump, credit spreads widen, borrowing costs rise for businesses and individuals, and all things economic start to tighten and get constricted. And so when you have this type of elevated move, and I'll talk about that in just a second, that there is something for you to see, because what happens is these conditions can easily spill over into the stock market, into the equity markets, into areas which you're very familiar with in your 401ks and typically in your own personal portfolios. So what does this mean? Well, if this spills over and you start to get this contagion effect where the prices of bonds go down and yields spike up, then you're going to have a real problem ultimately in the stock market, because the stock market in many ways is predicated on where rates are. So, I mean, that's not always the case, and we could talk more about that at another time, but yes. But essentially, what happens is when this index spikes, so typically the index trades between 70, 80, that's sort of a normal representation of it, around 70 to 80. But on Friday, we saw it spike 26% up to 108. 108. This is what had me go, okay, we got an issue here. I've got to make some decisions. So I actually ended up taking a very conservative approach. When I saw this jump, it was up 26%, like I said, on Friday. That's signaling something. We don't know what it's signaling, but it's signaling something. And if you see this coefficient get up here to the 120, then to the 140, 150, and then closer to 200, the Fed must act. So any type of like quantitative tightening they've been involved with, they've got to discontinue. They will have to do something called quantitative easing, which is just another way to say they're going to have to print money. They're going to have to make sure that they can go in there and buy these instruments to keep the yields low enough so everything doesn't blow apart. Now, look, I know a lot of what I'm saying right now might be Greek at some level, But you have to, first of all, just dip your toe into these understandings. And then over time, they'll start to integrate more into your basic approach and understanding of how the markets work. But understanding the MOVE Index, I think, is one of the things that a typical investor doesn't have much knowledge about. And that's why I wanted to share it today. So you'll hear me talking more about this over time and educating more on the ramifications of a spike in the MOVE Index. Hope this was helpful. If you want me to do more of these whiteboard videos or something, or you have a specific question you have that might be interesting for me to do a whiteboard video on, just let me know. I'd love to do it.